Welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's video. We are going to do something a bit different today. We are doing a collaboration with Chaz from the blogspot chazofthedead.com. He has done some extensive research on a few topics that I think are really important. Our video today takes a look at the missing 411 phenomenon and what information Chaz came up with when doing a review of that conspiracy theory as a whole. With that being said, the views in this video do not necessarily convey our beliefs at the shadows within. Let's get into it. Last month, a 3-year-old boy by the name of Casey went missing in North Carolina. The search was hampered by a large storm that rolled in shortly after the boy went missing. Fortunately, he was found perfectly fine 3 days later. When asked how he survived, Casey stated that a bear took care of him. Most wildlife experts state that this is extremely unlikely. However, the details of this story are a lot more common than people would expect. In fact, a researcher has dedicated years to compiling cases with very similar circumstances. It has been coined the missing 411 phenomenon. If you've been following paranormal or conspiracy news during the last few years, then odds are you at least heard of the 411 phenomenon. But for my less initiated readers, hi mom, hi dad, who haven't, let's take a moment to discuss. Missing 411 started as a series of books by a former police detective by the name of David Paulides. The subject of the books is what Paulides claims is a bizarre amount of disappearances of people in wooded areas. The first 2 books, one from the West Coast and one from the East Coast, published in 2012, focus on disappearances in and around the United States national parks. Later books would start to cover disappearances from around the world. Paulides claims the inspiration of these books came from a park ranger who informed him that something suspicious was happening in the parks in regards to missing people. And certainly, with 8 books, he has compiled quite a large volume of evidence to support his case while uncovering some interesting facts. One of them being the Forest Service's don't keep a list of people who have gone missing in the parks, which admittedly seems strange. And details of the cases can be even stranger, with people disappearing in seconds. Bodies being found impossible distances away, and even clothes being removed or put on backward. However, Paulides avoids making any claims that he knows the source of the phenomenon. He is extremely prolific at giving interviews in the paranormal community and has appeared on many shows, including massively popular radio show Coast to Coast AM and a personal favorite of mine, Australia podcast Mysterious Universe, as well as many others. But despite giving hours and hours of recorded interviews, he very strategically avoids putting forth his own personal theory to the cause of these disappearances. Instead, he insists that his readers take in all the information and come to their own conclusions, which is admittedly a pretty clever marketing ploy. The main argument against the theory is essentially this, that people go missing. Naturally, in more rural areas, there is more space to go missing, and this explains the high number. Skeptics suggest that this is not a bizarre number of disappearances, but a perfectly normal and explainable amount. And while a few cases certainly do have some strange aspects, skeptic researchers suggest that not a single case stands out as paranormal, and further that there is no clear correlation or connection between the cases. Then there's the matter of Paulides' other background experience. As mentioned before, he was a former police detective, which does make him more credible to some. But however, before he began publishing books about missing people, he self-published a few other books on Bigfoot. He also serves as the director of the North American Bigfoot Search. Of course, believing in bizarre things does not make your claims entirely invalid, and if you're still reading my writing, then you probably agree. But Paulides' Bigfoot research definitely comes into play when discussing the missing 411, but more on this later. My interest in the 411 phenomena started after hearing several interviews with Paulides and a few online discussions about the subject. The discussion has been continuing for years, ever since the first books were published. It had continuous fuel as a new book on the subject came out every year or so after. And recently, Paulides had been making the paranormal podcast rounds again, so I decided to bite the bullet and buy one of the books. Maybe I was falling for clever marketing by an independent author, but I agreed that I would have to read the books, or at least one and maybe watch the movie, before I came to my own conclusion. I was fully ready to accept that this was a true phenomenon that was truly paranormal. After my experience with the book, however, I am not so sure. I decided to start with the original volume, the one focused on national parks on the east coast of the United States. I was disappointed to find out this book did not include my home state of Florida. However, I was more disappointed to find out that the book was not for sale online from any reputable book dealers. Amazon does have copies of the book for sale, but they range from $80 to $150. To purchase the book at a reasonable price, you have to go to the North American Bigfoot Search website, which in addition to the book sells a variety of Bigfoot-related products. The website also appears very dated, as if it was established in 2005 and never updated. This was my first red flag. The books on this site go for about $25, less than a third of the Amazon price. There is also what the website calls a rare misprint of the same edition I purchased, priced at $500. I find this particularly interesting as the copy I purchased for $25 arrived with plenty of misprints of its own, and this option was not available when I originally purchased the book. Despite a suspicious website, I decided to give Paulides the benefit of the doubt, as I understand the difficulty of being an independent writer. Who am I to judge another writer trying to make a living? So I waited patiently for my book to arrive. It was a few days late, but I was excited to buckle down. I decided to do some camping and freak myself out with stories of other campers vanishing. As I started to read, I found what I was looking for. There were many really intriguing and frightening stories of missing people and bodies appearing in mysterious locations. The writing contained no exaggerations or metaphors. The stories very much read like a police report reflecting Paulides' experience in the field. I was enjoying it thoroughly. The stories varied in length, but I did start to notice a trend. The longer stories contained a lot of details that seemed Bigfootish. The longest story sticks out because of a sighting of a hairy man shortly after the disappearance. Paulides never states it outright, but the way his writing seems to be more inspired when talking about certain cases, combined with his history, seems to suggest a personal Bigfoot bias. The tone suggests Paulides definitely sees a correlation between the 411 research and his previous research. At this point, I was in. I was ready to dive into this kidnapping Bigfoot conspiracy. But then my suspicion aroused again. It was aroused by one story, which struck a chord with me, and I decided to do some extra research on it. This is when the second red flag appeared. I flicked to the back of the book where most nonfiction, research-based books put their sources. No sources. I flicked through the book and there was almost nothing that resembles a citation. I went back to the front of the book to look for a publishing house, an editor, or any other names associated with the book. Besides a self-publishing company in South Carolina, nothing. A few stories, however, did quote the names of newspapers that had written articles about the cases. But these examples were few and far between. Of course, I was surprised when one story referenced an article that was published by my hometown newspaper. This should be great, right? A spooky story that took place in my hometown, it should be easy to confirm, right? Well, it actually became another red flag. If you recall, this book did not contain any stories from Florida. So it is very suspicious that Paulides used a Florida-based newspaper as a source for a person who disappeared in Maine over 1,500 miles away. Even more so when you consider it as an article from the 1950s, a time when newspapers tended to make up salacious stories to help sell copies, and when police from different states did not share information about cases very often. I was now becoming very skeptical of the book that sat before me, but I had already spent $25 on it, so I decided to finish it. I continued to power through and began counting spelling errors as I went. As I got towards the end of the book, I began to encounter duplicate pages. Pages between 272 and 281 were all duplicated twice. Perhaps I got lucky and accidentally received one of those $500 misprints, but I think the more obvious conclusion is that the book has never been seen by an editor. Of course, independent authors deserve their respect and spelling mistakes happen, but combined with so many duplicate pages and a complete lack of reliable sources, it begins to look like the lack of an editor was an intentional choice. Fourth red flag, and hey, by 3 you're already supposed to be out. I was initially very enthused and spooked by the concept of this phenomenon, but after taking the author's advice, buying the book, and coming to my own conclusion, the conclusion was pretty obvious. While it does contain some great stories, and I respect the possibility that some may possibly be true, the truth is that they cannot be easily confirmed, and the few you can try to confirm don't shake out very well. So I tend to have to agree with the skeptics, If a good portion of these stories is false or exaggerated, then the few that aren't are most likely non-supernatural, relatively normal disappearances. After a disappointing experience with the book, I was certainly not feeling confident about spending money on the documentary. But thanks to the endless pool of information that is the internet, I was afforded a free viewing. I'm not endorsing this, but I'm sure you can find it as well if you really want. The documentary focuses on only a few stories, more modern ones, with witnesses and interviews. Bigfoot only makes an appearance as a bumper sticker, and there are only a few hints to this theory throughout the film. There is a main case throughout the documentary, and very similar to other docuseries that have been put out around this time, its main theme is, did the parents do it? Of course, Paulides uses other stories to slowly take away suspicion from the family and present his 411 phenomena as something possibly paranormal. It is clear that Paulides used his best cases to make the film, and it seemed to have fewer errors than the book I received. But I am reminded that the book is the source material. So while the film might present a few good cases, the basis that there are volumes of research to support the phenomena is not quite true. Even to someone like me, who is admittedly a pretty lenient person when it comes to conspiracies, the missing 411 phenomena is missing a certain quality to its research. And when dealing with fringe subjects, the standard of research has to be higher, if they are ever to step off the fringe. Thank you so much for joining us today. We thank Chaz from chazofthedead.com for providing us this review of the whole 411 phenomenon. We look forward to working together with Chaz some more on some other cases in the future. Please like, subscribe, share, and post a comment. Until the next one.